And so I just want to ask you, there are certain parts of this report that you are particularly proud of, that
Hmm.
you think there was really some groundbreaking work that went into it?
Hmm. I mean, I think that the challenge of talking about unequal opportunity is that you cannot observe things that didn't happen because those opportunities were missed, right? We only observe in economic data um, things that were actually activity that actually happened. And so unfortunately, we observe the most successful parts of our economy in the data, right? The people that already have jobs that who are already earning high income. I always talk about how when you look at GDP data, when you think about it, um, we are overrepresenting uh, the richest, most successful people in the economy. Right, they get a much bigger weight in GDP. People who aren't working, they get a zero weight in GDP. And so, relying on a measure, an aggregate measure like GDP, to figure out the health of the economy is
Mhm.
not really looking at the parts of the economy that are in most need of support to live up to their potential. And so the big challenge in our committee's work was, how are we going to prove this case where we don't have data because you can't measure that which hasn't happened yet, right? You can't. So that to me is a fundamental challenge of not just our committee's work, but the entire economics profession has this challenge, is that we are used to using data to support our theories and to drive our policy recommendations. And yet, there is inadequate data on people's struggles at the ground level, person by person, in terms of why are they not going to work? Do they have a job opportunity? Do they have a way to get to work? Do they have someone to care for their children while they go to work? I mean, these things, we don't ask people, why didn't you do this? We sometimes in our survey, in our official survey data, we sometimes ask them about what they are doing, like the job they have, what industry do you work in, what is your occupation, what are your hours, what are your wages? But we don't ask people, why aren't you working? So the fact is that we try to look at it from a more realistic person level perspective. But what that meant was often we were relying on in our research, not academic literature that was based on official economic statistics, but we were often relying on stories by journalists or our visits to for different field hearings to different parts of the country to actually interview people and ask them their own personal story in terms of how are they struggling in terms of finding childcare, in terms of finding a job, in terms of getting training, in terms of getting health care and getting support for getting a place to live, getting community services. So we discovered all these areas that are in desperate need for more government support. Like, this is what government should be doing, is, supporting public goods. And there's no bigger public good than untapped human potential, in my opinion. And so the problem is we can't see it in the data. We had to actually talk to people, and that is also something economists are not used to doing.
Uh, Gee, fortunately, you had some experience that with the Concord Coalition.
Exactly. So the Concord Coalition gave me, my experience of the Concord Coalition gave me so much insight and so much for me, I'm very mission driven now in this area of economic disparity and economic opportunity. And I think a lot of it comes from my years of experience working with the Concord Coalition, even before I officially worked for the Concord Coalition when I was at Brookings and working on the fiscal wake up tour. I mean, you just learn so much talking to real people, in real places and getting outside the beltway. And I honestly think that in terms of, maximizing our country's economic potential, politicians really need to get out of the beltway and talk to real people, and not just talk to people in their home districts,